What would you say if an officer held out a breathalyzer and asked you to blow into it right now? If you answer the wrong way in the first few seconds, you can hand the state evidence, lose your license, and make a DUI case much easier to prove. And the worst part is, you might do it while thinking you're being polite and helping yourself. Hit subscribe right now because the line you're about to learn could protect your license, your wallet, and your future. Like this video now, so you can find it again when a normal traffic stop suddenly turns serious. Here's what you need to know before you ever face this. The first sentence out of your mouth can force the officer to make something very clear. Is this a voluntary roadside test, or is this the official test your state says you must take after arrest? That difference matters more than almost anything else you say that night. I'm also going to show you how to stop yourself from talking your way into a DUI, how to avoid giving consent to side searches you never meant to allow, and how to end the stop. The second the legal reason for holding you is gone. I've analyzed over 200 body cam videos, and you see the same mistake again and again. Drivers talk too much, agree too fast, and don't ask the one question that gives them clarity. Let me show you exactly how to stay calm, sound respectful, and protect yourself without acting hostile. Here's the reality. A lot of drivers think a DUI stop is all about one machine and one number. It's not. Your words are evidence. Your body language is evidence. Your answers to simple little questions are evidence. And if you get confused about what kind of breath test is being asked for, you can walk straight into a bad decision without even knowing it. Most people have no idea there can be a huge difference between a small roadside breath test and the official breath test after arrest at the station or in a testing room. In many states, refusing the official test can trigger fast license penalties, even if refusing the roadside one works differently. That's why you never just say yes or no, without first making the officer explain what exactly is happening. The first tactic is simple, and it may be the most important sentence in this whole video. Before you agree to any breath test, you ask one clean question. Here's exactly what you say. Officer, is this a voluntary roadside test, or are you saying I am legally required to take it? Word for word. Memorize that line. Here's the trick they don't want you knowing. That question forces clarity. You're not refusing. You're not arguing. You're not playing lawyer on the shoulder of the road. You're asking the officer to say what kind of test this is and what legal stage you're in. That matters because your choices can change depending on whether you are still on the roadside, whether you're under arrest, and what your state's implied consent rule says. Implied consent just means your state may punish you for refusing an official chemical test after a lawful DUI arrest. It does not mean you should blindly agree to every device waved in your face without understanding what it is. Watch what happens when you use that line. The officer now has to answer you. If the officer says it is a roadside test, you've learned something important. If the officer says you're under arrest and this is the official chemical breath test, you've learned something even more important. Now you understand the risk of refusal before you make the next move. Defense attorneys use this exact line in court because it shows you are trying to understand your legal duty. Not act reckless or combative. Bad way. Most drivers say, I guess so, or if I refuse, I'll look guilty. Then they blow into a device without knowing whether they had a choice, and that confusion helps the case against them. Good way. Smart drivers say, Officer, is this a voluntary roadside test, or are you saying I am legally required to take it? Then the officer has to explain what test is being requested, and you stop guessing. This comes straight from Supreme Court rulings. In Birchfield v. North Dakota, the court said breath tests after a lawful DUI arrest are treated differently from blood tests. In plain English, the law gives officers more room with breath tests after arrest than with blood draws. That means you need to know what kind of test you're being asked to take before you answer. If blood gets mentioned, another case called Missouri v. McNeely matters too. In plain English, the case says police usually need more legal justification before taking your blood. So your first job is not to panic. Your first job is to get clarity. And here's the reality. That one question does something else for you. It buys you a few seconds to slow your breathing, control your voice, and stop yourself from blurting out dumb stuff like, I only had 2 beers, or I'm probably fine. Those little statements hurt you. If you remember nothing else from this video, remember this. Never consent to a breathalyzer without first saying, Officer, is this a voluntary roadside test, or are you saying I am legally required to take it? That sentence can change the whole stop. Have you ever been asked to blow during a traffic stop? Tell me in the comments what you think you would say first. The second tactic protects you from the biggest mistake after the test question, and that mistake is talking. Once the officer starts asking where you were, how much you drank, when you started drinking, or whether you feel okay to drive, you need to shut that down in a calm way. You look at the officer and say this, I choose to remain silent, and I do not want to answer questions without a lawyer. Those exact words. Keep your voice low, keep your hands still, keep your face calm. This is 100% legal. You do not have to help build a case against yourself with your own mouth. And this part is huge for you because DUI cases are not just numbers. They are stories. Prosecutors love stories. They love saying you admitted drinking, admitted leaving a bar, admitted being tired, admitted taking medication, admitted you were confused, and admitted you felt okay to drive. Every little sentence becomes another brick in the wall. Former police officers have confirmed this works because once you stop feeding extra details, the stop gets much harder to expand with your own words. Bad way. Most drivers say, I only had 2 drinks. I'm fine to drive, or I'm just nervous. Then those statements get repeated in reports and used to make you look impaired. Good way. Smart drivers say, I choose to remain silent and I do not want to answer questions without a lawyer. Then the officer loses a huge source of easy evidence. This matters because of a Supreme Court case called Pennsylvania versus Muniz. Let me say that in normal English. The court recognized that what you say and how you say it during DUI processing can be used against you. Slurred words, confused answers, and little admissions can all become evidence. So when you stay quiet, you're not being rude. You're protecting yourself. Now, to be clear, asking for a lawyer does not always stop an official breath test from being requested if your state requires it after arrest. But it does stop you from chatting your way into trouble. That is a massive difference. Watch what happens when you do this the right way. The officer asks, how much did you have to drink tonight? You say, I choose to remain silent and I do not want to answer questions without a lawyer. The officer asks again in a different way. You repeat it. The officer tries small talk. You stay polite and say the same line. Legal experts agree this is your strongest protection because silence cannot be twisted the way nervous talking can. Your goal is not to win an argument on the roadside. Your goal is to stop giving away free evidence. The third tactic is the one that protects you from a stop turning into a full hunt through your car, your bag, or your phone. A DUI stop can quickly become something bigger if the officer starts asking to take a quick look. So you need a clean refusal ready. Here's exactly what you say. Officer, I do not consent to any searches. That's it. Short, respectful, and clear. Memorize it right now. A lot of drivers think this has nothing to do with a breathalyzer stop. That is exactly why they get burned. If the officer thinks you're nervous, or sees something legal but unusual in your car, or just wants to keep fishing, consent becomes the shortcut. If you give it, you may lose one of your best arguments later. This is 100% legal, and you should say it even if you think you have nothing to hide. Your rights are not only for guilty people, your rights are for you. Bad way. Most drivers say, sure, go ahead, I've got nothing to hide. Then the search happens, the stop grows bigger, and now you're dealing with way more than the original reason you were pulled over. Good way. Smart drivers say, officer, I do not consent to any searches. Then you keep your rights in place and the officer has to rely on actual legal authority instead of your permission. This comes straight from Supreme Court rulings too. In Schneckloth versus Bustamonte, the court said consent searches can be valid when the consent is voluntary. Plain English, if you say yes, the search can become legal because you gave permission. That is why your words matter so much. You don't need to fight, you don't need to pull away, you don't need to argue law from memory. You just need to clearly say you do not consent. If the officer searches anyway, that issue can be fought later. But if you say yes, you may have given up that fight before it even starts. And let me show you exactly why this line works so well. It keeps you from sounding sneaky while still protecting you. You are not saying, you can't search. You're saying, I do not consent. That is clean. That is smart. That is hard to twist. If you ever freeze during a stop, these are the 7 words you want in your mouth. Most people already clicked away. If you're still here, you're in the top 10%. Drop a comment saying, I'm still here because the next part is the one almost nobody remembers under pressure. The 4th tactic is how you stop a simple stop from dragging on forever. Once the ticket, warning, or DUI investigation mission is done, the officer should not keep you there just to keep fishing around. So you need one last calm line ready. Listen closely because this is critical. You ask, officer, am I being detained or am I free to leave? Those exact words. This line matters. Because time is a weapon during traffic stops. The longer you stay there, the more chances there are for more questions, more mistakes, more nervous talking, and more reasons for the officer to keep building the case. If the officer still has a legal reason to hold you, you'll find out. If not, you have now forced the issue in a respectful way. I've analyzed over 200 body cam videos, and you can see how often drivers never ask this. They just stand there hoping the stop is over while the officer keeps talking and digging. Bad way. Most drivers say, are we done? Or they just keep chatting nervously. Then the stop drags on, more questions come, and more trouble shows up. Good way. Smart drivers say, officer, am I being detained or am I free to leave? Then the officer has to either state a legal reason for holding you or end the encounter. A case called Rodriguez versus United States backs up the idea here. In plain English, the Supreme Court said police cannot stretch a traffic stop longer than needed just to chase unrelated stuff without proper reason. That does not mean you walk away whenever you want. It means you can ask the right question and make the officer define what is actually happening. That is powerful for you because confusion helps the stop grow. Clarity helps you protect yourself. Now let's put the legal side together in plain English so you actually remember it when your heart is pounding. Birchfield versus North Dakota tells you breath tests after a lawful DUI arrest are treated differently from blood tests. For you, that means never guess what kind of test is being asked. Ask first. Pennsylvania versus Muniz tells you your own words, and speech can become evidence in a DUI case. For you, that means stop talking about where you were, what you drank, and how you feel. Rodriguez versus United States tells you an officer cannot keep a normal stop going longer than needed without real legal reason. For you, that means ask whether you are being detained or free to leave once the stop should be over. If you remember those 3 ideas, you remember the whole playbook. Get clarity about the test. Stay silent about the facts. Do not consent to searches. End the stop when the law allows. Let me show you exactly how this plays out in a real stop. You're driving home at night. You get pulled over for drifting once in your lane. The officer walks up and asks for your license. You give it. So far, fine. Then the officer asks if you've had anything to drink. The wrong way starts here. You laugh because you're nervous and say, just 2 beers with dinner. Now the officer smells alcohol, hears your admission, and wants more. Then the officer holds up a handheld breathalyzer. You panic and say, sure, whatever you need. You blow without asking what kind of test it is. Then the officer asks if he can look inside your car. You say, I've got nothing to hide. Now you have admitted drinking, maybe given breath evidence, and maybe opened your car up too. Watch what happens. A simple stop turned into a full evidence package because you kept trying to seem cooperative. Now here's the right way for you. The officer asks if you've been drinking. You say, I choose to remain silent and I do not want to answer questions without a lawyer. The officer brings out the handheld device and asks you to blow. You say, Officer, is this a voluntary roadside test or are you saying I am legally required to take it? Now the officer has to explain what the request is. If the officer asks to search the car, you say, Officer, I do not consent to any searches. If the officer keeps talking after the legal reason for the stop is done, you ask, Officer, am I being detained or am I free to leave? That version does not guarantee you go home. Nothing can promise that. But it does mean you stopped helping the case against yourself. You created clarity. You kept your rights alive. You acted calm, respectful, and smart. That is the goal every single time. Next week, I'm revealing what to say when an officer claims they smell weed coming from your car. Subscribe right now because that line gets people searched every single day, and the next video will show you how to handle it without making the stop worse. So lock these 4 lines into your head right now. First, ask what kind of breath test it is before you consent to anything. Second, stay silent about drinking, where you were and what you did. Third, do not consent to searches, even if you think you have nothing to hide. Fourth, ask if you are being detained or free to leave when the stop should be over. You do not need to be loud. You do not need to be rude. You do not need to sound like a law book. You just need a few clear lines and the discipline to repeat them. Hit subscribe so you catch that weed smell video next week. Smash the like button if this just taught you something you were never taught in school. And drop a comment telling me which line you're going to remember first. Stay safe out there.